Good afternoon, welcome back to N+1 days of MvvmCross, and today we're going to carry on with collectible, which is the sample we've been building up over the last couple of episodes. And currently the state of collectible is we have a core project, and in that project we've got a add view model, a home view model and a list view model, and we've just got a Windows phone UI for that at the moment. In terms of plugins, we're using location plugin to see where we're adding the collectibles. We're using the messenger for lots of background communications. We're using the picture chooser to allow us to take pictures from the camera. And we're using SQLite in order to store persistently our data. And what it looks like on the phone at the moment is we've got a home page which shows our latest thing we've collected. We haven't done beautiful layout or anything. We've got an add feature which allows us to add some things and to take pictures from the gallery or from the camera. And then we've also got a list feature which allows us to see everything we've collected. So as the final step for this little hop in Windows Phone only, I'd just like to change it so that when I click on one of these guys, then I can actually load up a details page. And from the details page I'd like to be able to delete and maybe to edit. I'll think about edit. I might not have time to do that today. Okay, so let's dive into those activities. And what we need to do is we're going to take the list view model. And the list at the moment is a list of collected items. And shall we do it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a method, a command onto here. An I command. And this command is going to be the show detail command. Yeah, so it's going to be show the detail for a particular list item. So what we're going to do is we're going to return a new MvvmX command. But rather than actually just being an MvvmX command that doesn't take a parameter, this one's going to take the collected item we want to actually show. So let me just zoom in. So this is going to be a generic command, and it's going to take the collected item. And so the action in here is more going to be, given that I'm asked for an item, what am I going to do with it? And then we're going to actually use show view model, and we're going to put a parameter in there about what we want to show. So we want to show a detail view model. Obviously we haven't written that yet. And then let's pass in an object which actually says which item we want to show. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in let's pass in a real object. So it's going to be a new detail view model dot nav. So we're going to create a nested class for this. And that's going to have as a property, it's going to have an ID which is going to be the item dot ID. So I've kind of done this a bit back to front to normal. But now let's just create these things and see if we can get it. So I'm going to create a class called detail view model. And that's going to be a public class detail view model, and obviously is going to inherit from MvvmX view model. And we don't know what constructors it needs at the moment, but we do know that we want this class, this nested class called nav. And we know that in this nested class we want to have a public int ID which we can get and set, because that needs to be serializable. And then we know that when we navigate to the detail view model, and remember navigation was done back in like n=5 or something, and the way you did it was you had a reserved method name called init, and you just expect it to be called with a nav. So there's our init, and what we want is when we're called with init, we want to use the property from the nav. Of course, the navigation. And what I want is to pull out the ID and to use it in some way. So now let's start building up, and what we probably would need is we probably need a data service. What did I call it in here? Was it an iCollection service? So it's an iCollection service we're going to need. And what we probably need is we need that to be read-only, because we're going to just get it once and then store it. So we'll then use resharper to get that in our constructor like that. What we'd like to do is we'd like to here use the collection service to find a specific nav. So what we'll do is we need to go back to the collection service interface. We need to add a method to it. And this one's going to be a collected item, and it's going to be get by ID, int ID. So that's the interface we've changed. And obviously now we need to actually implement that, so we'll need to go back to collection service itself and implement it. And you know, this is normal kind of run through code. And to do that, we'll need to go to the repository and we'll need to return get ID. So now we need to add that to the repository as well. So again, we'll just use resharper to do that. And that's the method we'd like. That looks good. And then in the repository, which is in here in the data store, we'll again have to implement it. And this is where we actually touch SQLite. And here we will just return connection.get. And the thing we're getting is a collected item. And we're going to get it by ID because that's what it's set up as. So that should all the way through actually return the right type of thing to us. I won't put error handling in at the moment because we don't really need it in our simple example, but you would for a real app in case some sort of flow gets wrong and you manage to navigate to something that's been deleted. So there we go, and we should now be able to go back to this detail view model that we're building, and we should now be able to say I'd like to get my collection item, and I'd like to get it using navigation.id. Yeah, and the reason we don't pass in the navigation, we don't pass the entire object across, is because this navigation itself needs to be serializable. It needs to work across application restarts, and you can't do that with a real object, so you have to do it with a key instead. So here in this view model, what we'd like is we'd like to have our collected item. So let's do it. And I'll just call this the item because that's all it is. And that's going to be a get set, but obviously we'd like to do it just in case we ever need to do it asynchronously, or to refresh it, we'd like to do it with the raise property changed, and we'll do that as item. So now that's the majority of our detail view model set up. Let me just move that to another type, another file, so you can see it better. So this is our detail view model. We know it's got a nested class for navigation, which it uses here. And we also know that it's got this item. We'd perhaps like to add, let's add a delete method to this. So let's do it. We're going to add a public iCommand, which is going to be a delete command. And we'll use resharper to pull in that type. And this is going to be a get return new MvvmCross command. Okay, so now we're on to what, how we're actually going to do our delete. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to have a collection service.delete method. And again, we need to pass in something. So here we may as well pass in the whole item. Yeah, and then once that's done, what we want to do is we actually want to close the current view model, because what you want in the display is you want to go back a page at that stage. So let's do that. And now we need to implement the delete in the interface. So we do that. This is where we said we'd add more methods later. And then we need to actually implement that in the service. So you know, this is going to continue through as you'd expect. So the service, we know that when we add things, we publish a message. So we probably also want to do that when we remove things. So let's do that. Let's go to the repository and delete the object item. And that method already existed for us, so that's good. And after we've deleted it, then we'll publish this, a collection changed message. Sometimes you might not want to, use that in such an explicit way, but here that's pretty good, and that's what we want to do. So that's good. I don't think though that we have a listing for a collection change within our list view, so we'd probably want to do that as well. So let's add the messenger here. MvvmCross messenger. And maybe offline afterwards I'll try and start drawing out some images of what's being done where in this application. And what we'll do is we want to subscribe within this list to these messages. So these messages are of type collection changed message, and so we want to be called back on collection changed. So we'll do that. And obviously with any subscription, what you have to do is you have to change it as a _collection changed token, because that's your subscription, and we'll create that as a private field. Put that up the top. We'll make that read only. So that's our collection change token. This is just going to be used to make sure we don't ever lose that method, that object. And then in here is our message. And whenever we get one of these messages, all we want to do is we want to reload list. And we've already got a method here that does the reload list, so let's just use that and create that as a method. So reload list. And you can see that's just going to be our method. So hopefully, and again it's kind of underlining there's some read-only things we could do here. And hopefully you can see now how that will hold together. And the only thing that I haven't really explained in detail is this close. Close is just a method that actually wraps a message to the presenter, and the presenter tries to handle it. So when the detail view model calls close, and it will try to close that. Okay, so with that done, hopefully that's all the changes we want to do in our core. So that builds. We need to add the additional functionality to the UI views, and to do that, what I'm going to do is I will. So first of all, we need to add the navigation to the list view. Now with lists in Windows Phone, there are two ways to actually respond to messages. One of them is to use the blend behavior stuff, and that's really probably the better way of doing this. So that's what I'll try and do. Hang on, I'm just going to briefly try to pull this in using a behavior. So let's see if we can do this. So with behaviors, what you try to do is you try to pull in, and let me just see if I can just pull it in. So there's a trigger that you need to pull in, and what you do is you need to add the references to the blend libraries for this. So you go to frameworks, and I think it's in extensions, is it? You can see I've got quite a lot, and there's a system Windows interactivity that you need to pull in, and that's a blend pull in that you pull in, if that makes any sense. And after you've done that, you should be able to pull this in, and then you should be able to pull in the MvvmCross event to command that this trigger will use. And what that will bind to is it will bind to the name of the command in our view model, which for list view was a show detail command. And so that should hopefully enable us to do our navigation. I quite often don't use that. I quite often, instead of using that, will just use a tap on the list box item in some way. But for now, let's see if we can get this working in this kind of behavior way, which is the way that most XAML guys seem to work. So that's what we'll do. And so I pulled that in, and then I need obviously to add my detail view model. So let's do that. Add a new Windows Phone portrait page. Just going to be my detail view. Pull that in, and obviously because it's a new view, we have to go and do this NVX phone page, and we need to do the same thing in the XAML for the detail view. And then when we've pulled that in, we need to actually set this up. So for the title for the page, obviously it's going to be collectible for the application title. So that's the name of this demo app. But for the title, what we'd like to do is like to bind this to the item.name, or was it the item.caption. And then for the body of this, what we'll probably use a stack panel again. And we'd probably use very similar content to as in the add view, but obviously just not editable. So let's take a look at this. And in the add view, we have fields like we have the caption. Well, we've already got that handled. We have the notes. So let's add the notes to our detail view. So this will be a text block. So I have the text. That's going to be bound to the item, and we would probably put text wrapping on that because it could be quite long. We would probably want to have the picture, almost certainly, so I'll get that as well. And let's put the image in, and we'll make that quite large. We'll make that 250 by 250. and that's going to be the source. So previously we used picture bytes, but we don't use picture bytes when we're in there. We use the item.image URL, was it? Or let me find out what's on an individual item again. We have the item.image path, and we know that when we use the image path from the previous examples, then we want to use the picture, the file path to image converter. So that comes up for us in IntelliSense very helpfully. So that's our image, and then we have our text, which is notes. And then we would probably want to have some text about the date that the item was taken. So let's just take a look. So we've got this when UTC, so we'd probably want to use that. So let's use this text block here would be when UTC. And we would probably want to use some sort of converter on that. But for now I'll leave it, but there should probably be a converter because you probably don't want it in just UTC, you probably want it to say time ago. So I will, let me use the time. I'll add a time ago converter, let's do it. So we're going to add a converter, and that's going to be called time ago. So we need to write the time ago converter, and I do have one of these written, so that's quite convenient. But let me just create a folder in the core project called converters. And I'm going to add within that a class called time ago value converter. And I happen to know that I already have one of these. So if I open a file, and what I'm going to open is c:/misc/mvvx. So I know I've got one in the tutorials in the value converters. So let me find the value converters. Value conversion, and it's in the core, and it's in converters. So let me see what's in there. And so it's in here somewhere. So somewhere in here I should have a time ago. So here it is. So I'm just going to copy this functionality. You don't need to see me coding that live. So what this functionality does, just to show you it, is it inherits from MVX value converter, and it expects a date time as the property, which we're going to have because it's there. And all it does is looks at the total number of seconds, and it does a just now or a number of seconds ago, etc. So with that coded, we then need to turn that into a native one. So again, we come down to here, and very much as we've done with others, we just make it into a native one. And if you don't remember what native ones are about, then I think that was like possibly number 4 in this N+1 series. So we're just going to do that with the time ago value converter. See what I've typed wrong. Okay, it's called. So hopefully we can pull that in, and I'll put that in its own file just for the sake of completeness. And then because it's Windows Phone, we also have to add it in the XAML, so we'll do that. Time ago, so it's a native time ago value converter, and we'll just call it time ago. So at this point we should actually be able to display in the detail view when this was taken using the time ago converter, so that's good. What else? What other fields were there that we wanted to display? We might want to do something with the location. So again, we could add another converter for that, so let's do this. Ultimately we want to display the location on a map, but we can't do that right at this moment. So what I'll do instead is, just because it's a bigger step than will fit into this time gap, so what I'll do instead is I'll apply a converter to this location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another value converter, make that a little bit smaller, and this value converter is going to be a public class, and this is going to be a item location value converter. And this is going to operate on the whole of a collectible item. So it's going to be an MVX value converter, and it's going to operate on the whole of a collected item. Once we've done that, we can override the convert method. And what we're going to do is if the value, so this is the collected item, doesn't have a location. So if not collected value, we're going to return the string that says unknown. Otherwise, we'll return a Latin long. So we'll return string.format, and this is going to be, we'll just do it as a kind of syntax with braces. So we'll do 0, and we'll just do it to 4 decimal places, say. And we'll do the second one as well, obviously, in similar. Obviously, ultimately, you would want to put this on a map rather than just to do it as a string. But to get us started quickly, this is what we'll do. And this is going to be value.latitude and value.long. Let me again put this one in its own file. Item location value converter. And so there you can see the entire functionality. Obviously, I can get rid of the dead return at the end. And you can see that's what it's going to do, and it acts on a collected item. So let's again put this through the native stripping that we have to do. So we'll create a public class native item location value converter, and that's going to be based on the native value converter like that. Again, we'll just use resharp to put it in its own file. And again, we'll have to add it to the XAML, so we do that. And this time we just add it as value converters :native item location value converter, and this is going to be x:\key equals, and this is location, item location. So with that coded, we should then be able to go back to our detail view, and we should here be able, underneath this text block, we should be able to put in a location. So what we'll do is we want to bind to the entire item, and we want to bind to location. So it's the location's name. This is what I've done wrong. I haven't used static resource for these things. Static resource time ago. So the converter we're going to use is a static resource, which is the item location. That should do it. Okay, so that's going to be our detail view. Let's see whether it works. I haven't added the delete button at the moment. I'll do that in a moment. But let's see first of all whether we are building. So that builds. So does the navigation work as we expect? Have I managed to get the right syntax for the thing? So if we go to the list and we choose one of these, and it's saying there's an invalid cast, so that's not quite what we were hoping for. Let me see what the call stack is on there. And the cast is in trying to get a collected item out of the event command. So let me just see what that is. And it's probably just that I've used the wrong syntax, so let me just find out. And what it is in the list view, selection changed event command. Okay, that I think should have worked, so I may need to just come out of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat. I'll have to come back to doing this properly with behaviors another time. What I'm going to do is instead I'm going to actually go and use code behind. There you go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bind to the selection changed method, and I'll create a method for it. And when the selection changes, if e.addedItems.count, so if there's one thing that's added, which means somebody selected something, then what I'll do is I will clear the list box that's been passed it in, clear this selection. So this is going to be the sender that's passed into us, this is going to be the list box. So I'll just set that selected index back to -1, which clears it. But what I'll also do is I will actually navigate. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to get hold of the view model here. And this isn't the best demo without the behaviors working, but apologies for this. And we know that it's going to be a list view model, so we'll cast it. And once we've done that, we can then actually just call that show detail command ourselves, and we'll execute it using the e.addedItems. So I'm not sure what I did wrong, but I don't want to debug it live on this stream. So what I'm going to do is that, and hopefully that should give us a navigation. Let me see. I may have that wrong again, in which case we'll come back to it. Let's see, list. No, again, it's saying invalid cast. So what is the... it's because there's a list. Sorry, so this was just the first one we wanted to pass in there, and hopefully that will solve it. So apologies for this state of this demo today. I'm actually just keen to get on and do some other platforms because I've been in Windows Phone too long. So now you can see we have the navigation working. It's not ideal that we're going via the thing. You can also see the location set up there, and you can see when I added these things. So that was 31 minutes ago. Both of them were. If I add another one, so this, I'll take the picture first just so I know I'm taking a picture of. It's going to be a flower. And I'll come with keyboard, pretty flower. And some notes about the flower. Then once we've added that, then we should be able to go to the list, and we should see that when we click on that, it was added just now, whereas the others were half an hour ago. And there's the location, and here's some notes about the flower. So you can see how that all ties together and how it works. There's one more thing we said we'd do in this demo, which was the delete. So let's add the delete. And that's going to be in the detail view. Now you would normally want to use the application bar for this, so let's use the application bar. Normally what you do is you pull in a bindable one, so there's some really good libraries out there to do bindable application bars, but for whatever reason it's not straightforward to do bindable application bars in Windows Phone because it's part of the operating system, not really part of our page. So what you have to do an application bar, let me just see, is you add the application bar to the bottom. And I've managed to mess up my page doing this. We'll come back to that in a moment. And what you need to do is you need to add, okay, no, I've got the syntax wrong. I'm going to have to find an existing application bar and add it in. So one moment, I will tab away and tab back to get my application bar. So the syntax, I think, for an application bar, I'm just pasting this in, is you take an application bar like this, and it has to have a shell application bar inside it, and then inside that you want to have a button, and obviously normally you'd want to have an icon ready made for this button. I don't think I have any at the moment in this project, so I will just skip that icon for now. And what we would have is a delete button. Okay, let me put in an app bar. So to add an app bar button, I will add one from a well-known source. And what I'll do is I'll add it from C:program files. I think it's in /86, and I think it's in Microsoft SDKs /Windows Phone / well, I'll go for 7, it should be good enough, icons, and I'd like the dark ones, and I would just like to add the delete. So I'm going to add this delete, and that needs to be of type content, which it is. And so now in my button I should be able to add this delete. So let's add it. App bar delete rest. And so the language for that's going to be delete. And normally what again you do is you use some sort of binding, but I'm going to cheat and I'm just going to use code behind again. So I'm going to request it, and it's going to say give me that, and I'll use the code behind. So when delete gets hit, what I'd like to do is, again, I'd like to get a hold of the view model, so I'm going to do it. Detail view model, and I can do that from my view model property, and I can just call the delete command, and I'll just call execute on it, passing in no parameter. So that's a bit kludgy. Normally you'd want to do that using data binder, using some sort of data binding technique in the UI, but for now we're going to do it that way. And then we should, unless I've managed to upset my, let me see if that builds. Maybe I'll just upset my inverted commas. Yes, I've got a double inverted commas. So we should now be able to build this, and we should be able to delete items from our collection as well. Perhaps in a full app you'd also want to add some sort of prompt saying, are you sure? Which you could do via messaging or some other route as well. So let's see what happens. If we go to our list, and let's get rid of the football. If we hit the bin, the football's gone, the list has been updated. When we hit back, we get our normal thing. If we were to add in another thing, so perhaps we'll go and I'll add in waterfall. Then you can see we have the full kind of app experience. We probably now want to go back and change this OK, so that this was a application bar command rather than anything else, and perhaps this add and list as well we'd put down here as navigation commands. And obviously we might redesign the whole thing, but you can see how these pages now fit together, they communicate, they're talking to the database. So if I do exit the program, Shift F5, hopefully that's going to exit. Then when I come back in and I run collectible, then it does run up. It does still have the same data, and it remembers the times these things were taken and where they were taken, etc. So that's as far as I'm going to take it on Windows Phone for now. I might come back and add mapping later, but for now I'm quite keen to get on and do a different platform, and to show that all this code that we put together can be reused. So with that done, apologies if I've gone kind of a bit strange today and not quite as direct as I should have done. And apologies about hitting errors with these casts and things. But hopefully that's given you an idea of an app that we put together. It's got 3 or 4 pages in it. It's quite usable, has geolocation, has images, has lists, doesn't quite have maps but does have geolocation, and has a SQLite database in the background. So I'll stop there, I'll come back and I'll do it for Droid or iOS next. Okay.